and balances. The founders are caught between two ideas: national election, or appointment, if you will, election by the Congress. Neither is a really good option. National election. Well, let me try to disabuse you of some of the things that you might hear from the opposition. The founders were not anti-democratic, anti-people, anti-anything. There's an article that this guy goes through American politics textbooks. These guys don't know anything about the Electoral College. The number of mistakes these big political scientists make. Well, that we make mistakes is really crucial, because my premise is that will cause confusion. So they had to come up with a different system. They didn't want a parliament, the legislature electing the president, didn't want national elections. So, what do we do? And they talked about it long and hard for a long time. How are we going to appoint an executive? We want an executive who will have some kind of power and activity, but we sure don't want one that's all that powerful. So how do we try to ensure that the president is not given a carte blanche? Well, what they came up with was a temporary legislature. That's the Electoral College. It's a temporary legislature. It comes together on some day in December to actually vote for the president, and then it dissolves. And it comes back 4 years later with different members. But one answer to majority rule is, oh no, the Electoral College is directly elected by the people. Just the people of the states. That's what happens. That's exactly it. National election, we vote for the president, and so do about 200 million people? No, 125 million, something like that, voted in the last election. That's just untenable. So the states choose this legislature, and the states then, in the past, appoint the electors. On what basis would they appoint electors? Well, what they were trying to do is go for a government with virtue. And this is oftentimes lost in certainly modern political science, but the whole rest of it, it's lost. What we do is have the people elect the electors. Then the electors can, if they so choose, vote for whomever they want. Most states have passed a legislation which does not allow faithless electors. That is, they are elected to represent this person, and they vote for Mickey Mouse. That's been done away with. So what you need to do then is understand that the states are supposed to elect the president. Well, McGuire, why would the states checks and balances? If you have an election and you get a majority, that's the national government. But if the president is elected by the states, you get a non-national president, which hasn't turned out. Let me quickly go into why it hasn't turned out. The growth of mass political parties under Andrew Jackson. The founders never could conceive of these two massive bodies, representing the vast majority of Americans. And what that does, political parties, is start to make the electoral process more political. So the members of one party would gather together, and we want to elect our guy, and they want to elect their guy, and, well, off you go. But the states still did it. And then, of course, Abe Lincoln made his contribution by destroying the states. Now, You didn't ask my personal opinion, but you're sure going to get it. The South was correct constitutionally. It was. There is nothing in the congressional powers that comes anywhere near mentioning secession. And then the 9th and 10th Amendments say, if Congress doesn't have it, the states do. If we elect the president by the states, he's apart from that national idea, or supposedly. The Electoral College then has worked fairly well for, 250 years? Why bother to get away with it? Well, what else might the Electoral College do? Well, as I mentioned before, you know what it has the ability to do is turn close winners or losers into a majority. So if you have a very close race, Bill Clinton, in his first election, 92, he only got 43% of the popular vote, but he won a huge number of electoral votes. And here's my point. We are not trying to trick the American people, but if we had a national vote and the president got 43%, a whole lot of people would be really happy. What if we have the Electoral College and people come along and say, well, okay, 43, well, he won a majority of the Electoral College, yeah. Did you hear anybody complaining that he only won 43% of the vote? No. What have we done? We have legitimated a president and given him a majority. And the people can say, he's the president. He's a legitimate choice and our choice. You have other systems, France, they go through all sorts of runoffs and stuff like that. What the Electoral College gives us is, if you will, a legitimate president. Certainly.
They're working on it.
And then the Electoral College disappears every 4 years. So the electors vote, and another thing about the states. It might seem logical that these guys would fly off to D.C. and have a big grand party and eat Michelle's lunches and then make their vote for president. They don't. They have to do it on the same day in their state capitals. Why? To keep the national government away. We don't want them getting too much power. That's the point. That's exactly the idea. So, Madison's idea is preserved. The people are the sovereigns. Remember that? The people are sovereign. But they only elect the president indirectly. And what is preserved through the whole thing? Did he say checks and balances a whole lot tonight? Yeah. It preserves checks and balances. We are supposed to be a country of freedom, not tyranny. That's it. So what do political parties then do? How do they change the electorate? Well, you have these two organizations, and they're different, but not all that different, because until recently, they have to draw in a large number of people. So what does that then mean? What does that then mean? That the parties come to the center. Anybody ever hear of the bank robber Willie Sutton in New York in the Depression? So, Willie Sutton was quite a character. I believe he won a Best Dressed in New York while he was on the lam. Great guy. Gave interviews, and supposedly he would rob a bank, run across the street, and meld into the crowd and watch the cops as they're... So, inevitably, Willie gets caught. Newspaper guy says to him, "So, Willie, why do you rob banks?" Willie turns and says, "That's where the money is." Why do politicians run in the middle? That's where the votes are. That's where the votes are. So political parties really have, in a way, changed the idea of the Electoral College in a small way, but I think it's still effective. I do. I think it's effective. Why is it effective? Because it prevents other systems. That's the idea. If we were a democracy, it wouldn't last on this kind of a scale. If you recall the election of 2000 and we had a direct election, wouldn't it be incumbent on every state that if they could change the vote, they could go out and dig up 100, 1,000, 10,000 votes and just swing it away? So let's say that only happens in 10% of the states. That's 5 votes. That's 5 states. And then what might happen? They're going to the Supreme Court. So it's June, and we don't have a president. Little minutia. If we do not select a president by the appropriate date, who becomes president? Nope. The old vice president. So Joe Biden might be president yet. Go, Joe. Go, Joe. Why couldn't you have somebody from the House sitting there? Because there's an election going on and they can have an effect on the election. You don't want that at all. So, what are our takeaways from the Electoral College? And kind of the way I designed this was, if you get in an argument, a discussion with somebody about the Electoral College, I'm here to give you silver bullets to destroy, well, not Dracula, but some of them. First, we're not a democracy. Everybody says that, and we don't. Most of us use it colloquially. Oh, yeah, we're a democracy, the people rule. Okay. But when you start to look at actually how the government works, you have to be much more specific. The purpose is to protect our natural rights. How do you do that? Again, second takeaway, checks and balances. Checks and balances prevent tyranny. Nobody can become that kind of a tyrant. It might seem it every once in a while. Was FDR a tyrant? No, I really wouldn't say that. No, I wouldn't. But it can seem tyrannical at various times. The Electoral College helps mitigate that. Okay? Another, and this goes along with checks and balances, is that the states and the national government should have an approximately equal power. Now, Abe Lincoln, and I thought I'd get more of a rise out of that. All my son or I have to do is around my New York Jewish liberal mother-in-law, and if you know those people, no, they just mention Abe Lincoln. And then Matthew and I, Matthew, who are your 3 favorite presidents? Lincoln, Lincoln, and Lincoln. And then she has another martini, which is fine for everybody. But why have we had such a growth in the national government? Many, many reasons. But the states are gone. They're no longer a counterbalance to the national government. Why? I'm glad Abe Lincoln did what he did. He was not constitutionally right. He was morally right. And while I'm a strict constitutionalist, that makes a lot of sense to me. Sorry, it does. America made the right choice. But there were consequences. And then the 17th Amendment. What's going to happen? Are the states going to come back? If you were to ask me, so how can we reform any of this? What can we do? And I'm a political scientist. I can't read the future. Really, what's going to happen? I don't know. No, I don't. But marijuana might be saving federalism. Yeah, come on, where's that applause? What happened? What is the state of Colorado effectively doing with marijuana? Ruining the brains of our children. Besides that, but just hold that aside. Oh, who said nullification? You get the gold star. To nullify means that in a specific place, this law has no effect. Let's make this up. Coming through those doors, you must wear shoes in this room. Hi folks, how you doing? I'm in charge. All right, take off your shoes. But no. This is my room. I control it. Take off your shoes. I have nullified that rule. Why can't the states nullify an action of the federal government? Why not? It was destroyed in the Civil War, but what Colorado is doing now is nullifying. What they are saying is the national government has control over drug policy, and that's another discussion. How did they get control of that? They just came along and took it so they could get reelected more. But what Colorado is saying, there are laws that the federal government makes that we, the people of Colorado, are not going to adhere to. Why? Because we're the people of Colorado, and this is a sovereign state. The people of Colorado give us the authority to do this. And what's happening? Well, I don't know. I don't think anybody knows what to do. But that's my hope for the future. The states come back. All right. Take questions afterwards. Where's David? Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Great overview of the Electoral College. Thank you, Dr. McGuire. Up next to dive into the data and the polling data is David Flaherty. Thanks, David.
Thanks. Thank you, Professor. That was great. That was really good stuff. Honestly, in my long-term time, I was in Washington, D.C. about when we had that little ballot dispute in Florida in 2000. There's this group called Citizens for a Sound Economy, and we drove over the National Observatory. We used to chant out front while Al Gore was still in there. We'd be like, "Get out of Dick's house. Get out of Dick's house." Anyway, that was 16 years ago. Where's that clicker? I'm going to be talking about several things that are backed up by data. My view of politics, where this election is going, where Colorado is going, where the Colorado electorate is all based on a lot of data. If you're going to be in my line of work and be a pollster and get it right, you better know your stuff and you better know your data. You better understand exactly what demographics are of Colorado. So whenever I give a talk like this, what I like to do is make sure that my audience is educated about the voter demographics of the state of Colorado. What percent is Republican? What percent's Democrat? What percent's female? Which percent is older and younger? That way you're really going to understand a lot better what is going on with this election. You're also going to understand a lot better how to look at a poll in the next 50 days. First thing I want to talk about is breaking up the Colorado voter registration by party, okay? Over here on the left, back in 2008, 1/3 of our state was registered Republican, 1/3 Democrat, 1/3 unaffiliate. It was a third, a fair fight across the board. In those 8 years, unaffiliate affiliation has grown by 4 points, if you can see that. That's the green line up top. Republicans have lost 2%. We now make up 31% of the vote. And Democrats have also dropped down to 30. They've actually bounced back up. And I'm going to show that in a minute about current registration. But understand that under the Obama years, more and more people are identifying as unaffiliated. They're not choosing to be a Democrat or a Republican. But there's more to this story than that. This is not male and female. This is female voter registration by party, okay? That blue line up top, this is out of all of the roughly 1.6 million registered women in the state of Colorado. Back in 2008, 31% identified as a Republican, 32% as an unaffiliated voter, and then 37% identify as a Democrat, okay? So when you see a poll in Colorado or somebody referencing, well, you got the gender gap, and again, that, you know, the Republicans doing so poorly among, you know, females, let me explain something to you. There are more female Democrats just in numbers than there are over Republicans, okay? We have a problem here, okay? We have a 5-point gap. Women in Colorado are not choosing to be Republicans. They are choosing to be unaffiliated or Democrat. And if this was the same among males, we'd have a real problem. The Republican Party technically would be dead, but here's the saving grace. Look at male voter registration by party, okay? Back in 2008, 36% identified as Republican and 36% as independent. Only 28% identified as Democrat. In the last 8 years, Democrats have dropped down to 26%, unaffiliateds have shot up to 41%, and Republicans have dropped 3 points. Okay? And what's that really mean? Well, basically, out of every male voter registered in the state of Colorado, only 1 out of 4 identify as a Democrat. They got major problems picking up male voters, and they've actually bled in the last 8 years. At the same time, Republicans have also bled 3 points. But overall, men are going to tend to be more unaffiliated Republican. There's not many male Democrats. But let's really get into the numbers again, because the whole basis of how our elections unfold and how turnout is so important really makes a big difference. Over here on the left, you're going to see among 18 to 34-year-olds, okay? And this is party registration. You can see half of them identify as independent, okay? That's really not that surprising. Like when my years at the RNC, I used to pore over these kinds of demographics in every congressional district, in every single state, for all of the folks, you know what I mean, that we'd be sending out data analysis reports to. It's not that hard to realize you're a college student, you go to college, you're like, you know what, I really don't know what I am, so I'm choosing to be an independent, okay? But look at the 35 to 44 age range here, okay? Oh, and just remember, out of 18 to 34, only 22% are identified as Republican, 27% are identifying as Democrats, and half, okay? Now, this 35 to 44, 27% identify as Republican, 30% is Democrat, and 43% is unaffiliated. Okay, that's a significant change, and I'm not going to get into the trend lines, but back in the day, you would see people coming out of, you know, being 34 years old and being a young adult, and they get married, and they have kids, and you own a home. Taxes, your mortgage rates, your educations, things touch you in real life, and the Republican Party would be able to peel off enough folks to be able to do pretty well. In fact, in 2004, guess what percent of 35 to 44 years old, now remember, this is under Bush's administration, guess what percent of those younger adults identified as Republican? It was 37%, okay? It's dropped literally 10 points in the last 10 or 11 years, okay? And it's gone completely over to the unaffiliated side, where Democrats have pretty much tread water right around that age. They've stayed there. They haven't lost, but they haven't won over hearts and minds either. The point is that when turnout in Colorado, and you have very large numbers of 18 to 34 and 35 to 44, we don't do well. Republican candidates do not do well. Democrat candidates do well. Because a lot of these unaffiliated voters, they will normally break for the Democrat about 2 to 1, okay? This is something that I consider the biggest threat to the Republican Party being viable in 10 years. This has to change. Because after a while, when only 1 out of 5 of you identify as a Republican, you're going to be less likely to choose the Republican candidate that you may not know a lot about. Those folks that don't really pay attention, but you're like, you know what, I'm going to make a decision up. Well, you know what? Republican Party's losing that battle. However, where are Republicans holding their ground? Seniors, 65 and older. Republicans are older, folks. That's why in our primaries, when 400,000 people go to vote on June 28th, guess what percent of the vote in a Republican primary is 65 and older? Take a guess. Anybody? It's about 40% to 45%, okay? So when you're running for a primary, and that's what I tell my clients, you know what I care about? All I care about is that. All I care about is 55 and older. I literally advise candidates, don't even bother talking to anybody in a Republican primary that's 55 or younger. You know why? Because these two age groups are going to make up more than 65% of the vote. On average, the percentage of Republican primary voters that are 18 to 34, it's less than 8%. And you all have limited money, so it's like, why bother to try to get that 8%? Go ahead, go have fun. But the bottom line is, this is where the vote is in a Republican primary election. Our voters are older, their voters are younger. Granted, that's kind of what the trend's been for the last 8 years here in Colorado. This presidential is kind of turning some of that on its head right now. But understand your demographics, okay? Everything you look at, this is the rule. This is exactly the way things go every year in Colorado, year in and year out. We do better in odd year elections. Excuse me, let me go back one. We do better in non-presidential year elections than presidential years. Because you know why? I'm going to show you this in a minute. Because Republicans dominate. Older voters pay more attention and they vote in off-year elections. Younger voters come out in presidential years. And that's why we don't do as well, which isn't good. How are we doing on Colorado voter registration since December of this year through June? I remember in 2008 watching in Arapahoe County Republican voter registration advantage of 25,000 get completely erased by the Obama effort. It was amazing. It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life in my 25 years of doing politics at the national level or here. It's amazing how their decision makers decided to say, you know what, we're going to out-register them. We're going to set the playing field, and they did it. I've never seen anything like that. It was amazing to see. Is Hillary doing that? No. But basically, since December of last year, 146,000 people have registered to vote. And it's like, how are we doing on the registration battle? I'm keeping a close eye on this. I want to see if something's coming out of the woodwork on the Democrat side. It's not as overwhelmingly as what the Obama folks did, but 34,000 folks identified as Republican, 45,000 as Democrats, so that's a net loss of about 10,000. But Democrats are also losing out to unaffiliated voters, okay? These things matter. These things add up over time. So be aware of that, okay? Republican Party's got work to do on registration. I'm not going to get into why or what or the perfect message. Each part of our state has a lot of different parts to it, where people either lean Democrat or Republican. But the bottom line is here, 30,000 more people are identifying to being unaffiliated than a Republican. That's not good. And this trend continues, it's really going to be good. We're going to be California before you know it. Turnout demographics from past general elections. So I just gave you that point on party and stuff. Okay, now let's look at it. This is out of everybody that turned out to vote in these election years. What percent were Republican, what percent was Democrat, and what percent was unaffiliated? Well, back in 2008, Republicans and Democrats fought each other to a draw. Evenly. Okay? 35% Republican, 35% Democrat, and 30% unaffiliated. The vast majority of that 30% that's unaffiliated did not vote for John McCain. They broke hard for Barack Obama. A lot of the folks that came on the rolls, those unaffiliated voters, they didn't want to identify as Democrats, but they voted Democrat. And 2008, I wouldn't call it an outlier election, but it was definitely a movement sort of election. 2010, because you have the federal agenda from 2009, which basically awoken and created the Tea Party. From a federal agenda that went so far and put so much debt into the system, you had a lot of voters coming out of the woodwork that just gave up on Bush because of the donut hole and his spending, even though he's dealing with the war and all of that. These are people that stopped identifying or participating in elections. After the 2009 legislative session, that's all of a sudden where they came. In our primaries here in Colorado, where Ken Buck just beat out Jane Norton, normally when folks vote in primaries, they have strong vote history. Rarely do you have new participants. That year, more than 50% of the vote that voted in 2010 in the Republican primary had not voted in a primary going back 6 years. That is what I consider the leave me alone, the fiscal conservative, the I've had enough. Like, they were so taken aback and scared by the Obama agenda and the Democrat agenda of 2009, they came on the scene, and boom, look what happens. Republican percentage out of everybody that turned out to vote, +6 for Republicans. Now, granted, as we know, 2010, unlike some other parts of the country, was sort of a mixed bag here. We picked up this state house, and Ken Buck came up short by about 29,000 votes out of about 2 million cast. End of the day, though, see what happens in 2010? The unaffiliated drop 2 points. Democrats can't compete because their voters are much younger than ours. But our voters, older voters, turn out in 2010. 2012 comes along, boom, look at that. Republican advantage, only 2. Obama wins the state by 5 points, about 140,000 votes. And this unaffiliated came rocketing back up. 2014, okay, the Republican advantage grows out to by 5 points. Now, granted, it's not the 6 points of 2010, and in all honesty, the Democrats actually did a pretty good job of getting their people out to vote, because it's harder to get their folks out. Younger folks are not as engaged. They don't care as much. And unless you have a guy like Obama on the ballot, it's a lot. It takes a lot to get those folks out. Where our voters are always there, because they're older, they pay attention, they have more time on their hands, in all honesty. And remember, Corey, to put things in perspective, 2,080,000 votes cast. He wins by 39,000 votes, okay? If 15, 20,000 people had changed their mind, Udall would still be in there. And if you remember, Udall went nuts on his war on women rhetoric and doubled down on it, okay? Honestly, if that guy had just told people why he got up out of bed, you know what I mean, during his time in the Senate, and he did something other than fight for women, he probably would have won. But I really believe the reason that he was just beating that dead horse left and right, which is pretty breathtaking to watch, that message worked really well to turn out their base, those younger voters, you know, to make them feel that Corey really was going to take them away. It was as much of a strategy to get their base to turn out as it was to, you know, beat up Corey. Well, at the end of the day, we barely won. And keep this in mind, though, folks, you know, other than Corey's election, that's the only election Republicans have won going all the way back to 2004. Okay? That's not good. So people ask me a lot, are we totally going into a Democrat-leaning state? No, but you got to look at the track record. And Corey's going to have a tough re-election, you know. Michael Bennet right now is on his way to, you know, being re-elected. But this is what happens, okay? This is why. This is what's going to happen. When we go into 2018, as we have an open governorship, you know, I'm not sure how these numbers are going to go. And honestly, for 2016, I'm probably going to keep it somewhere around here. Because look, see how close it is? A lot of those numbers don't change. As a pollster, this is my base that I work off of, and then I make adjustments as new data comes in. Percentage of vote of all the females that vote, okay? In 2008, out of all the women that voted in Colorado, 39% were Democrat, 33% were Republican, and 28% were unaffiliated. So again, when you see a poll and they're like, yeah, the Republicans up by like 6 points among women, I really question that poll. Because there simply are not enough Republican-leaning women. And, you know, in all honesty, not every Republican woman's going to go out and vote for the Republican, okay? To be very honest with you. And not every Democrat's going to go out to vote for the Democrat candidate. There are some folks that leave their party to vote for a candidate in the other party, but it is minimal, it is small. We're talking about 8, 9%, unless it is a unique election or a unique sort of a candidate. But at the end of the day, you know, they got the women, and we need to do better on that. But look at that in 2010, where we closed the gap by just 1 point among all the female women that voted, you know? That's when we're competitive. And that's kind of frustrating because if you want conservative candidates to do better and do well, these trends have to change. Among men, you know, thank God. That red line of the Republicans, okay, look at that. We had a plus 12 in 2010. And again, a plus, you know, 9, in 2014. Those gaps have to exist. Otherwise, we do not compete. You don't want to live like this, okay? You want to build a cushion. We could do better. But these are the facts. This is the way the world works in Colorado, okay? We have a dominant on the men, they dominate on the women, and then we have sort of kind of fight over the middle, the 17%. Okay, now this is a chart that shows voter turnout by age range, okay, to just kind of finish up our little lesson on 101. Okay, look in 2008. You see that 25%? You see that blue line going up and down? That's 18 to 34. Those are the Democrat voters. They are younger. They do not vote Republican. When they make up 1 out of every 4 votes, forget it. Forget it, okay? If they achieve that in 2016, forget it. But there's a different wrinkle to this election cycle. See, in 2012, it hit 23%. Look at them drop off like a rock, though, in 2010. 18 to 34 only made up 14% of the vote. They did not come out to vote. And when they stay home, the Republican candidates are in business. It's just math. Because the vote is so polarizing, okay? So, as we look here in 2012, you know, in 2008 versus seniors, 65 plus, the green line, and that's kind of hard to see, but in 2010, they made up 1/4 of the vote, and they also made up 1/4 of the vote in 2014. Living on the edges. So, what I want to talk about also now just a little bit is modeling techniques, because right now, Colorado voter registration by party, and I got these numbers this morning. This is interesting. We went over 3.7 million registered voters in Colorado on the September count. This is new. 31% are Republican, 31% are Democrat, and 36% are unaffiliated. And as you can see, there's about 20,000 more registered Democrats than Republicans in the state right now. But that unaffiliated, because it's like, I can tell you from a pollster mostly what a Democrat would like to see, the kind of candidate they're going to vote for. If you're for public education, education's key. Education's much more important to a Democrat voter, not as much to a Republican. Not saying they don't care about education, but you want the key to a Democrat's heart? Talk about fixing public education. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. And I'm not talking about vouchers. I'm not talking about school choice. I know that some of you from Jeffco and all the fights we've had in Douglas, all the fights we've had in Jeffco. Bottom line is, what about this 36%? What about this 1.3 million? How do you know where they go? Other than like, if they're a man or a woman, if they're gender, whatever. That's why we do one thing what's called predictive modeling, where we statistically estimate every single voter in the state of Colorado. I have a code on that I estimate whether you run into a bucket or you fall into what kind of an affiliate are. Do you lean Democrat or Republican, or are you in the true middle, as I call it? And we do this statistical modeling practice, which we came up with back in 2004 for the Bush campaign when we knew that we were going to lose. And Ken Melman and Karl Rove were like, we got to come up with something other than just running the same old stuff. So we started to create models on very specific issues. So what I do is I go in the field and I ask 10,000 Coloradans questions like this. Tell me if you agree or disagree with the following statement. Government is almost always wasteful and inefficient. Too much power is concentrated in the hands of a very few large companies. Gay and lesbian couples have the right to get married. Stricter environmental laws and regulations cost too many jobs and hurt the economy. When I do these modeling surveys, people are asking me, or sometimes the client's like, well, no, that's really not. We ask stark questions. There's either right or wrong, black or white. Because what I'm doing is a machine learning technique where I need 10,000 interviews because I want to know exactly people that strongly agree with that government is almost wasteful and inefficient. If you disagree with that, let alone strongly disagree with that, I'm pulling the liberals out. All of a sudden I can start to see your true colors, okay? This is what the modeling is designed to do. It's machine learning. And I take all kinds of data and I tack it onto your file, from census data to consumer data to election return data. We'd love to get some other data because it's hard to do predictive models of 3.7 million people. Like, I wish I had the Zillow data to know exactly what all of your home values were worth right now. But it doesn't exist. Obama can buy it because they got $1 billion account to do the predictive modeling. I would love to know exactly whether you rent or lease or own your car and what kind of car you drive. And I'd like to know how old it is. Because when you're modeling somebody, the only way the algorithm will work is I need to have a data point present on nearly every person I'm trying to model. Well, there's only so many things I can use on that, because the model, I may have 200 different variables on folks, but the problem is that the model, or, the algorithm's only going to use 7 or 8 predictors, like your age, whether you voted in a primary. A lot of this other sexy stuff is like, oh, I know because you drive a truck and truck owners, well, whatever. You know how many people out of 3.7 million I know that drive a truck in Colorado is? That's reliable, good data? It's about 200,000. What's that going to get me? Because the model's not going to use it. Anyways, point is, not to get in the weeds on the statistical stuff, I ask these kinds of questions and then we put you into buckets. I have 4 kinds of Democrats, I have 4 kinds of Republicans, and I have 3 kinds of unaffiliated folks in the middle, okay? Now, these are just women voters, and that's nothing against the men, but women really do decide our elections in Colorado. Unaffiliated women decide our elections in Colorado, and in particular, women that are about 50 or older decide our elections in Colorado. They're the ones you want to win over. But as you can see, lean Democrat, unaffiliated women, 16%, 12% true middle, 4% lean. The point I'm trying to make is those bars in the middle, most unaffiliated women will lean more towards Democrats. They are up for grabs, if you will, but this is the way that we can help target and understand the Colorado electorate better. And we've been doing this data now for 5 years, because it's not cheap to do it. Unaffiliated women lean Democrat. Among the 619,000 unaffiliated registered voters, women in Colorado, 50% lean Dem, 37% are true middle, and only 13% lean Republican. They do. We didn't know this until after the election of 2012. And it was like, wow, we got to be better. We got to be more targeted, because normally campaigns would just guess. I don't know, give me unaffiliated women 50 or older and let's send them this piece on economics or taxes. And again, I just want to get to the election. I'm going to I want to go forward a little bit further here and talk about not just what these women care about, but let's get to our latest survey results that we've looked at. Okay, you in the majority, the minority. How many people are familiar with the Raise the Bar Amendment? Shall there be an amendment to the Colorado Constitution, make it more difficult to amend the Constitution? 2%. Gathering petitions. Raise a hands here. Who's for it or who's against it? Who supports it? Okay. Who opposes it? Okay. Who's undecided? Okay, we did this survey at the end of August. And just so you know, in Amendment 71 is this thing there, Raise the Bar, really making it much more difficult to amend the Colorado Constitution and also much more difficult to actually get something on the ballot. 2% in every electorate. 47% support it, 38% oppose it. And I know this may be a little bit difficult to see, but who's really struggling with this issue? Who opposes it? 51% of Republicans are fine with it, 50% unaffiliated, but the Democrats are struggling with it. Women are struggling with it. Who's no right now? The younger folks. So younger Democrats are against this. You know why? Because they feel that if they make this tougher for folks, the little guy's not going to be able to have his voice heard in an election. That's what's really coming through on this. Colorado Care, Amendment 69. Who wants their state income taxes to go up by 10%? For free health care. Never have to deal with a doctor or an insurance company ever again. It's true. It's the utopia. Just think. Pot, now free health care. No. This is a long thing. And the way I always test these, I do read the entire language or paraphrase it as best as possible because that's what you're going to see on your ballot. This thing's dead as a duck. 65% no. 27% yes. I mean, Planned Parenthood's coming out to get it. The guys that are running this campaign called me up and they were like, how did you conduct your survey, and all of that. And, so you always got to be respectful, because this guy just knows that for the next 60 days, he's just going to be knocking on doors for no reason. And this is nice. 45% of Democrats opposing it. We love that. They actually do care to some extent. But across the board, I know it's kind of see these no's, but look, I mean, even the younger folks, 18 to 34, when we pulled this back in January, the beginning of the year, we were concerned if we really had a large turnout of the younger folks, like Obama type, the Bernie type, that were like, yes, give me free everything, redistribution of wealth, all that. They're not buying it either. So just this thing's done. I will not look at this for the rest of the election cycle. You can take it to the bank. Minimum wage. Shall there be an amendment to the Colorado Constitution increasing minimum wage to $9, 30 cents an hour with annual increases up until $12 by January 2020. 55% support this right now. Look, here's the beauty of this. Who really opposes this? Republicans. 74%, 3 out of 4 Republicans oppose this. 83% of Democrats are behind it, and 60% of unaffiliated folks are behind it. We've been looking at this in its all kinds of forms for over 6 years, and these numbers have never really changed. Only Republicans oppose this. These guys are pretty clever. They did the right ask at $12 an hour. They're not doing, California, LA, New York going for $20 an hour. Very clever. And look at those kids coming out for it, 18 to 34, 68% support it. Look, they're feeling the pinch. You know what's coming out in my focus groups? They want rent control. They really are freaked out by cost of living, okay? There are people out there, regardless of what you think, this issue is getting there. And it doesn't matter if you say, well, you're going to lose all the jobs. This actually loses jobs in the credit. That doesn't work. That message does not work, period. And they have no sympathy for the McDonald's franchisee owner, okay? They don't. If you're going to want to stop this, you got to talk about it another way. This has always been like this. We'll see what happens. We'll see what money's rolling out. We'll see what happens. But at the end of the day, minimum wage, I think, is going to get there at this time. Bringing back the presidential primary, Proposition 107. So there'll be a change to the Colorado Revised Statutes, recreating a presidential primary. And allowing unaffiliated electors may vote without declaring an affiliation with a political party. 54% yes, 36% no. Republicans oppose it, a majority of 50, but 66% among Democrats and unaffiliated voters. Among the younger folks, 7 out of 10, 18 to 34 voters vote. So look, again, do you get it now? Remember back to Demographics 101? When 1 out of the 4 voters are 18 to 34, things like this are going to get by. That's why they wait to put them on the vote now. In our focus groups in open-ended debates, you know why they're voting for this? Because you think they want more moderate, agreeable government so that we can have more moderate legislation and, that has nothing to do with it at all. You know why they're supporting this? Because they believe everybody should have the right to vote. Literally. It's a right to vote issue to younger voters and the folks that are really going for this thing. They don't understand, well, if you're going to be a Republican, you should be part of the club and, and kind of register. They don't even look at that way at all. It's amazing because I thought time to end the gridlock. Nope, it's a right to vote thing. And this thing's probably going to get there, as well as allowing unaffiliated voters to vote in other primaries. Presidential election, where are we? Okay, our survey showed Clinton up 41%, 36% to Trump. What's going on here? And remember, that was the same margin that Obama won in 2012. Republicans, Trump's getting 78%. Democrats, Hillary's getting 83%. Not a lot of strays. But look at these unaffiliated voters. Only 38% are going for Hillary, 24% for Trump, 22% for Gary Johnson. Gary Johnson is now remember, look at this. Look at this by age. See these yellow bars here? 45 to 54, Gary's getting 18%. 35 to 44, Gary's getting 18%. 18 to 34, Gary's getting 18%. Those voters normally will break for the Democrat 2 to 1. But since he's taking them away, this gets interesting. Okay? Normally, you know how Republicans lose state House, state Senate races because the Republican will get 4% of the vote and will just lose to the Democrat in Lakewood or in Jeffco or Arapahoe or our swing districts that we have. This is very interesting because Gary Johnson is actually creating more opportunity for Republicans. 4 years ago, those frustrated folks that didn't like Obama, but they were not thrilled with Mitt Romney, had nowhere to go, so they all fell into Obama's camp. That we couldn't make a good enough argument to show that Romney was a better choice. This election cycle, Gary Johnson is really the story, okay? Colorado legislative elections, we've been doing a lot of the House polling, okay? This election is very close. They're very, very close. Much closer than they were in 2012, to be honest with you. There's no evidence right now Trump is harming down-ballot Republicans. Voters are clearly separating the races, okay? They look at that as a completely different animal. It's not going to be this punishment that we were all worried about more in the summer. There are more opportunities for Republicans to do well, in all honesty. There's not this love of the Democrat Party. And in all honesty, we could actually get there and do pretty darn well in a presidential year. It would be the first time, really, since '04. If you're a challenger, introducing your voters qualified and thoughtful alternative to an incumbent is key. Don't run on, with all due respect to our Senate nominee, that you're an unapologetic constitutional conservative, okay? Because you know that true middle I showed you, that 17% in the middle? They have no idea what that means, and you don't have enough time to explain to them, okay? That's why he's completely out of step right now, how he's positioning himself, with all due respect to Darrell. He's an admirable candidate. Go to Michael Bennett's front page of his website. You know what he has a picture of? It's him standing next to somebody. Who do you think he's standing next to? Cory Gardner. And you know what he says underneath? Solving our problems together, the Colorado way. That's the message for the 17%. Not constitutional conservative. With all due respect, stop running the Republican primary, and you got it, like the professor said earlier, the votes are in the middle to win in Colorado, especially in a presidential year. Turnout's going to be incredibly important. It's totally unclear where it's going to go. Before, a lot more people would say, Republicans aren't going to turn out because, Trump's going to turn them off. Maybe. Personally, I think that Republicans are more likely to show up because we have more at stake. We're older. Retirement, Social Security, taxes, people living on fixed incomes, okay? They really care. And just because Trump's kind of tough to swallow at times, and he says some things, and he attacks individuals, well, he's getting a little bit better. Unbelievable that it's still where this is. Hillary, though, does not have those kids locked up, that 18 to 34. And, New York Times had a front page story about this. Our poll just showed that. Gary's getting their vote. They want Bernie. She's a sellout. Turnout's really going to matter. We're not going to really know until the ballots go out on October 17th, and that's when we track every single day and we can watch the entire vote come in. That's what we do. We put that up on our website. That's what I'm going to be watching, and that's how I'm going to make the adjustment as a pollster to know, okay, it looks like Republicans and Democrats are going to fight themselves to a draw, but are the kids voting out? We're going to compare it to 12. There's a way you can look and learn this thing. Thank you for your time.
We have about 10 minutes for questions, so I'll invite Dr. McGuire and David up here. Is this on still? Great. Might need some help carrying this down. Strong interns. Got it. Thanks, Brandon. Could you move it to the side a little bit? Thanks. So, David, answer the question, who wins the 2016 presidential election?
Ask me around October 28th when I have more data in to make a more educated call. It's going to be hard to tell. I don't know. Nobody knows. Look, next Monday night's going to be huge. Everybody's going to be watching that debate. How crazy is Trump going to get? Is he even going to listen to the moderator and just destroy, Lester Holt? He's capable of anything, but I think there's a good 25% of folks out there that they're going to make up their minds based on what they see at the debate. That's the next pivot point.
There are trends, though. I saw Nate Silver today. At certain points, Nate Silver's had Trump down to winning the election at a 30%. Now it's almost 50-50. For Nate Silver to be at 50-50 is pretty impressive. So there seems to be a trend. Is Trump trending?
Here's what's going on. Hillary's stuck in place at like that 41%. Donald has moved about 5 points, probably since coming out of the conventions. But again, what's happening is Gary Johnson is getting into low digits, into low double digits, and that is pulling from Hillary, because those younger voters have a place to go where 4 years ago they didn't. And that's coming out in a lot of the polling at the state level. Look, I basically throw national polls in the garbage. I could care less about them. They were irrelevant completely. If you're going to go to a site to really learn about what's going on, go to Real Clear Politics and go to their state level stuff and see his polls come out. Method of interview does matter. Some of these polls are using untested methods before, like online stuff and some really strange things. But really what's happening is Hillary's definitely stalled, if not fallen back, but Gary Johnson is starting to take it away. So you're kind of getting into a three-way horse race in certain states where it really matters.
Okay, one last question. I'll turn it over. Sorry, this is so intriguing to me. I have all these questions. You said that elections in Colorado are decided by 50-year-old unaffiliated women. Is there any chance Donald Trump wins 50-year-old unaffiliated women?
I'll tell you this. I did a bunch of focus groups. Honestly, it was back in April. And when I brought up Hillary and I brought up Trump at the time, they were like, oh my gosh. I mean, these women were just completely repelled by Donald Trump's style, manner, and so forth. But guess what their second comment was? But you're telling me I have to vote for that woman? She is literally in jail with as much is nowhere near as they're basically equally right now. Sure, some women are like, no matter what, we'll see what Hillary rolls out on things Trump may have said about women, but for the most part, they are not pleased with either candidate right now. And like I said, in all honesty, I think there is some room there. If Donald Trump next Monday night can start talking about how he's going to solve people's problems, how he's going to improve our economy, how he's going to get folks moving ahead again in education and addressing problems and actually acting and talking about to those things, he's got a real shot. If he's going to attack individuals, though, and military families and just be completely off record, he's just going to be wasting time. And in all honesty, I think he's done better in these last 2 weeks because that hasn't occurred. And obviously Hillary's had her own problems, not just the pneumonia stuff, but the mail, the email server stuff is coming out. The pay-to-play with Global Clinton Initiative news is just shocking to a ton of people. He could do it because they're going to have to choose somebody, and I don't think they're all going to go to Gary Johnson. And I expect Gary Johnson's support, even though maybe around 13 here. It's like as we get closer to the election, they're just going to not be able to do it, and they're going to eventually go one way or the other, and that's normally what happens. So that's what I'm going to be keeping an eye on. And we are going to be doing another survey and putting out the public results, by the way, around October 13th, 14th.
All right, questions. I got to go with my Mr. Coors there. Can you give him a camera or a microphone?
I wonder if you've done any polling on the doctor-assisted suicide and where we're at with that.
I wanted to add that to our survey that we did because we just released all these results, regarding the Senate and the House. But we have not. I very well may add it though to because it's such a unique ballot initiative. I did not add it just because when we do read it, I had to give it a stop somewhere, and the survey was becoming so long. I didn't want to add that one, but I will likely look at that in about a month. And I have no historical data from my firm, which has been doing this stuff for 10 years in Colorado, on any kind of assisted suicide initiatives or voter opinion.
Yes, ma'am.
Sure. All those results, I was in the field at the very end of August, right before Labor Day weekend. So it's like August 26th, 27th, and 28th. The viewing of the 18 to 34 years old, 18 to 34-year-olds, the millennials, that really pillar of the Obama, Democrat coalition, I don't think they're going to be watching the debate in as large numbers as folks, let's say, 45 and older. But just watching that debate is one thing. They have a big job to do on the Democrat side on figuring out how to position Hillary to get these kids to go out to vote for her. And it's going to be very interesting to see what they do. Yes, honestly, yes. And in all honesty, a lot of these women that are unaffiliated and unaffiliated folks do not pay as attention to politics as much as Democrats and Republicans naturally. In all honesty, they like a candidate that is for all of Coloradans. They like a candidate that is likable. In our post-election analysis, Hickenlooper, won that group by a solid 12 points over Bob Beaupre. Because even though they're using terms like Chicken Looper on the Chuck E. Cheese deal, and all of that, they knew this guy was just completely spineless. They chose him over Bob because Bob didn't have a campaign enough to change their minds to say that he was an alternative, but they liked Hickenlooper more because they felt he was for all Coloradans. You don't appeal to them on a policy in trashing the Iran nuclear agreement. You don't appeal to these women by talking necessarily about, policy-driven tax stuff. You need to be likable. You need to actually be, we do a lot of work for Senator Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania. We're to survive this election there, with 8 million voters in a Democrat-leaning state like Pennsylvania. What we're doing is just really making Pat a more likable and known, candidate, and not being so heavy on, policy, other than like opioid abuse and things like that. Those things sort of help.
My question goes to Dr. McGuire. You had talked about nullification, and my question was, since I expect that both of us care about the Constitution being restored, how can we balance states nullifying laws, and especially laws that are a bit more on our side than marijuana? How can we balance states nullifying laws with Article 6, Clause 2, the Supremacy Clause, which has the Constitution and the laws of the federal government as supreme? If we're trying to restore the Constitution, how do we balance that with nullification? Thank you.
That's a basic, I think, fundamental error that we make when we see the words, the law of the land. What that means is the Constitution. It's not the national government. It's not anything else. That's exactly what they meant. That the government shall supersede any other type of government, local districts, anything like that. That was the point. I am just convinced, which doesn't make me correct, that that idea in Article 6 doesn't really hold water. I think it's one of those things like a bone to a dog. Oh, Article 6, the Supreme. Oh my God, that settles it. It doesn't. It really doesn't. And especially in our, forgive me, in our modern times when we just don't understand the importance of the states. For example, and this kind of comes as a shock to you, what is the beginning of the preamble of the Constitution? We the people continue? Wrong. We the people of the states, and then it originally listed all the states. I have not found any explanation, but I can give you a quick one. They were in Philadelphia from May until September, which is a burden on anybody. And then they disbanded, and what they had were stacks of votes. And they gave it to a committee of detail to put the stack of votes into a readable framework. They then gave, the committee on detail gave it to a committee of style who would make it look like the wonderful declaration we have. And this is just in my imagination. Everybody's gone. All right, how do we start? We the people. Oh, okay, I got it. Now list all the states. Really? No, what do you got? Can we just get out of here? Everybody understands this. And it was missing from the printed Constitution. Things like that mitigate against Article 6, and we've just forgotten it.
Dr. Watson.
Dr. McGuire spoke of his alarm that his students did not know the Constitution. And with the educational system firmly in the hands of the progressive left, and the media firmly in the hands of the progressive left, what hope do we ever have of educating the next generation of voters that the Constitution is something we should value?
I'm glad I'll be dead in 10 years. That's the only solution I can come up with. I'm kind of unique. I'm older, but my son is 17 in high school, so I know exactly what goes on in high school. And it's nonsense. No, it's just nonsense. His English teacher made an argument about global warming. English? So him and his friends come there telling me about it, and I said, Matthew, with all the respect you have, next time ask her, what is the opposite argument? He did it. She didn't have a clue. Now, in my opinion, a person with that bias, lack of knowledge, doesn't belong near young people. Bill, I don't have an answer. No, I just ask good questions. Sorry.
I will do one last question. Yes, ma'am.
The open primary in Colorado. Do you think that the liberals are behind that push because then unaffiliated can vote in Republican primaries and they can vote for the candidate they think the Democrats can easily win against?
The people that are really behind that amendment are pro-business folks. I'm sorry, can you hear me? Are pro-business folks that have been frustrated with the lack of progress, honestly, out of our state legislature. They believe that if they can whittle down and make more districts competitive, that we will have more. Senator Lundberg over here, interesting to see him shake his head. That they really believe that they, through this process, can have more moderate members, whether more moderate Democrats or more moderate Republicans. Therefore, more things will get done, that the ball will be moved more. There will be more compromise in the legislature. Ironically, the states that currently allow an unaffiliated independent person to vote in either a Democrat or Republican primary, what do you think the participation rate is, by the way? Do you think like 50% of our Republican primary voters are going to be among independents? It's not. Look, in New Hampshire, okay, in our Republican primary, it's a once-in-a-lifetime kind of deal. There's only 125,000 voters there, okay? Independents at times will make up 40 to 50% of the total turnout on Super Tuesday, or on in New Hampshire, okay? But in states that really matter, like Arizona, for example, they allow it. The high watermark of the number of unaffiliates that have participated in a Republican primary in Arizona, where we do a lot of work, tops out at about 18%. Is that going to be enough to move the needle there? Maybe. But in all honesty, I don't think that the folks behind this bill have done their homework and realize they don't pay attention, folks. Independents don't engage. And I've yet to, see a campaign in Colorado where strategy has been, I'm going to make my way through my Republican primary by attracting all of these independents to vote. They can do that now. They can, make an effort. But in all honesty, we have 350 to 400,000 folks voting in the Republican primary year in and year out of our state primary. I don't think it's going to have a massive impact, but I could be wrong. But the folks that are really behind it, they think that this will create a more moderate, compromising legislature that will be some more sympathetic to business interests. That's what's going on. Look at the people behind the funds.
Great. We'll give our speakers a round of applause for their work tonight. Thank you. So you saw the numbers there where the millennials are breaking progressive, except for one area, and that's here at Colorado Christian University. So on your way out, I want you to give an intern a high five and thank them for swimming against the stream and being a conservative millennial. We're grateful for y'all. Thank y'all for coming out. We'll see you October 17th for Francis Beckwith.